Hello everybody, how are you all doing today? I hope we're ready for a gay old time. That's right, the gayest time. That's the only kind of time we have here. Is there any other kind of time? I don't think so. Wait a minute, okay, yeah, good, my audio is working, and do I sound okay here? Let's see, my audio is working. Lovely. Of course I've got it, and do I sound okay here? Let's see, my audio is working. Lovely. Woo! Of course. So, basically, something special has happened, something wonderful, something beautiful, which is that a while ago I uploaded a video to a separate channel. Hello, Derek. Pardon me while I just yawn. I uploaded a video to another channel where I gave 5 reasons I'm not an atheist. And I said that I was expecting someone to respond to those videos because I thought, isn't that just a hello, Theoac Gump, and hello, Derluck? Yeah, I thought that title would be very enticing. You know, people would be like, oh, 5 reasons. What are these 5 reasons? Let me look into it. And hello, Mr. Headliner. As hoped for, as prayed for, someone has eventually responded, and this person is called Scarlett. And basically, I think because the video is reasonably long, there's not really going to be too much fanfare. We're just going to jump in, see what is going to be said. And yeah, good. Right? No time like the present. I'm not an atheist. Here are 5 reasons why. I already have one thing to say right out of the gate, which is that I looked through the comments. I really, really, really wanted to watch this video, but I watched like a few moments of it, and I think I skipped through a little bit. But I kept seeing things where I was like, oh, I really want to talk about that. I kept coming up with ideas of what I wanted to say, and then I thought, I think that would sound unnatural. Like, I don't like going into live streams where I already know everything I'm going to say. So I was like, I'm not going to watch any more of the video because I want to actually be speaking from the heart when we're actually doing the video itself, rather than having all these pre-prepared thoughts. But I did read the comments a lot, and there was, I think, 2 separate people were like, well, you can tell this guy's really crap at what he does because of how terrible his audio quality is. But the audio quality for the video is actually good. It's just that Scarlett, and having downloaded it, made it sound bad, but whatever. Hello, Meritwave. Hello, Rick Nell. Hello, Matsumatra. Yeah, so some people are saying this is their first time being here, and yeah, it seems like there's more people than usual, so it's a bit of pressure, actually. You know, if it seems like this is terrible, it's just the pressure of so many people being here, and usually I'm great.
Hi, my name is Scarlett, and I'm an atheist and a skeptic. And today, at the request of a viewer, I will be looking at King Critical's 5 reasons he's not an atheist.
Some reason my button didn't work. I feel like maybe that viewer was someone who's a viewer of my channel, who was like, trying to get me some exposure. Because that's what I said. I said, if people are interested in seeing someone respond to these ideas, then by all means say, hey, so-and-so, whoever it is, respond to this video. Explain why this video is bad. So I'm down for that. Hello, Jeremy Reeves.
This isn't someone that does a lot of religious content. Really, Casey seems to focus on anti-trans videos, so, And my purpose in making a response is not to convince Casey of anything. I'm interested.
It's interesting to, not, that was not such a negative response to the anti-trans thing, which is fun.
In the
Hey, Zach.
Arguments themselves and why.
And of course, while you're all here, just like the stream, because that would be nice. Thank you.
I don't find them convincing.
Okay, cool.
And by the way, I have watched the whole video, so I know where Casey is going. I know the arguments he makes and how he makes them. Oh. And just a note, as I move through, I'm going to be referring to...
That's interesting, because that's the opposite to what I just said.
To King Critical either as KC or Critical. So I'm not saying KC, the name Casey, it will be KC. Also, his video is a bit long. It's over an hour. So I will be skipping some sections that I will attempt to summarize at the best of my ability, and hopefully,
Oh, thank you, Zach, for the congratulations. Yes.
characterize them correctly.
I realized, by the way, I actually almost wore the exact same outfit today that I wore for my last live stream. And so it's surprising how often that just happens. Like, even though I'm doing things several days apart. I think it's because, obviously I wear a lot of my clothes on rotation, and just every now and then it happens that, especially with jumpers and stuff, because, you don't own that many jumpers. Oh, wow, thank you so much, Ms. Sparkles, for $5 already. You can't see me. Can you change the chat settings to all chat people, please? And thank you. Oh, goodness me. And I'm sorry that, thanks to my issues on my end, you... Okay. Yes, thank you so much for doing that. I feel bad that you gave money for an issue on mine. So let's see. Do I know actually how to do this? I think I do. So, I've got the chat thing here. Is there a way to... Let's see... Moderation activity? How do I do this? Let's see. Is it... Okay, wait. I'm on the studio view. Is that the smartest way to be doing this, or should I actually just, let me try a different way of doing this. So I kind of need some water. It's all falling apart, isn't it? Okay. Let's see if I can fix it from here. Oh, so I got something that says moderation activity, but if I turn it on, I don't know if that does it. It just says moderation activity will be shown. Okay, it's not that useful. Oh, let's see. Top chat. Oh, I see. Live chat. There we go. I've got it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Sparkles. Oh yeah, I can see you now. Okay, cool. That's interesting. I hope does that mean it still appears? Okay, it does still appear here. Wow. Wait, does it? See, now I can see it here. Let me, you know what? I know how to do this. So I'll do pop out chat. Okay, this is what I want to do. It might be gross and white. Not that we hate our race here. But okay, wait, I think I know what to do. Okay, I understand how it works now. So I do pop out chat. Yeah, this is worth dealing with because it seems to be there's more people than usual. So if I do this, can I? Why is it? Why is it set? Oh, I know. Oh, goodness me, I have to do it again. Okay, so live chat. There we go. Sorted it, and then this should work. I really want to say live chat and not top chat. Okay, I like how it's still. Is there not a way to? Why is it set to top chat rather than live chat? That's very strange. Let's see. There's got to be a way to fix this. Because yeah, I can only see. Maybe, but I'm surprised. I don't know why some messages, like so many other messages, appear. So why would like random people not be appearing? That's the confusion. I will see. As one other thing I'm going to check. It might make it look a bit ugly, but I'm going to try this and see if it works anyway. So pop out here. Just worth looking into. Because for some reason, so I know that obviously the chat, see, it says top chat, but if weirdly, it says live chat on the actual thing, but then I can see, so I can make it live chat on my thing. So just for the record, in fact, Ms. Sparkles, I'll read your previous comments. Your previous comments are, sounds good to me. Atheists do love to fight over that. Amazing. I have been here before and YouTube hates me and hides my comments. Yeah, he can't see me at all. He needs to change it all chat. Yeah, but wait, am I stupid? Because I think basically I understand it says top chat. I am picking that up. And if I switch it to live chat, I can see everything. Yeah. So I've switched it to live chat and I can read you, but the problem is, for some reason, even though it's live chat on YouTube, the display that I have on the thing, I can't click on that. So the display on the thing, wait, I always want to look this up. I'm going to look this up. Sorry, everyone who's watching this but okay, I'm going to type into ChatGPT, hey, I want to make it so the display on OBS shows the live chat and all the chats instead of just the top chat on the live stream. But whenever I copy and paste the link for the chat window, it automatically is defaulted to top chat when I copy it to OBS. Let's see. Oh, let's see if this works. I don't think it will, but I'm going to try it anyway. So, and then dun, dun, dun. So I am going to do it on here because this looks nicer. Pop out chat. I will set it to live chat just to see if this actually works. Oh, is it because I need to sign in? But I am, you know what's also weird? I am signed in too, which is strange. None of this really makes any sense to me. Unless, why would, oh, whatever. Wait, let me just check one thing. This is not going to work. There's no way this is going to work. No, okay, yeah, I literally just did the exact same thing. My overlay is coming from, in fact, also, wait, hold on, why is it still, oh, whatever. Whatever. So yeah, it's kind of, I think it's related to the fact that I'm not signed in. But I also don't know how to make it so I am signed in. Because I am signed in. I know that makes, but obviously I'm signed in, but for some reason, okay, now it's not even appearing at all. All the other kids with the pumped up kicks better run, I run my gun. All the other kids with the pumped up kicks better run, faster than my bullet. What if I type in 2, say? No, that doesn't work. I have a working theory. Nope. Well, I managed to make it not appear at all. This is good. Why would it be like this? You know what, I could make it so I look at the live chat, but I don't know why it is that the live chat doesn't appear. Like the live chat that I can see on the window isn't what appears on the thing, as evidenced by the fact now it's not appearing at all. All the other kids with the pumped up kicks better run. Too many fans, it crashed the live. This is the problem I have, yeah. It's like everyone's here, we're all having a good time. Copy. I know, this is like, yeah, I'm already losing to technology. This is the age-old story of mine. And for some reason, I've never quite understood why it is it doesn't work. Like what causes that to happen. And I think I am actually logged in. I'm definitely logged in to the right channel. So, and then I do content, live, here it is, boom, boom. I've tried and tried a million times to make my streaming work. It's not that easy. No, it's not that easy. I don't know what it is that I did that caused it to just stop working entirely. That was pretty impressive of me that I managed to do that. I think I can still make it work if I do this. It will look really ugly. Wait, if I do pop out chat here. It's not as easy for me as it is for you. What am I meant to do with that? Oh, well. So we're back where we started. This is great, isn't it? Why? Yeah, it's weird it says sign into chat. That's the main issue, because there's no reason it should say sign into chat, because I am signed in. I wonder if there's a way... I could... Wait, okay, let's see what the other suggestions were. Streamlabs? Could I try that? Could I just like... I wonder if there's a way... Yeah, maybe this is what I want. So it says like chat box widgets. This is probably it. This is probably okay. What are the odds that I have a? I probably don't. Okay, let's see. This is log in with YouTube. Here we go. This is what I want, and this is me. Oh, I'm not like, oh my goodness me. Could you imagine if I was sharing this? But I'm not sharing this visual. Okay, so then I click on me. Continue. I don't know if I trust... I don't like... Okay, these are the things it's saying I should give it an option to do. See, edit, and permanently delete your YouTube videos, ratings, comments, and captions. I mean, like, Streamlabs is very famous. Like, Streamlabs is not some illegitimate site. It's not that I wouldn't trust them to do that. I just don't understand why I would possibly want to give them that ability. Like, why would I need them to have the... Like, that just seems stupid. And then there's view your YouTube account. I don't see if there's any reason to do any of that. So I'm just going to... I've let them see my, the status of my people. What do you mean user identifier missing? What do you mean? What do you mean? Okay, let's actually just do... Can you make me up a password, please? Yeah, suggest a password. There we go. Use strong password. And my date of birth. Can you believe this? Also, why does it let me pick a date of birth in the future? I'm going to set up a StreamYards account for my future son. Then that's when I was born. Sign up. What do you mean user identifier missing? What are you talking about, you stupid? What does that mean? Oh, wait. Oh, I see. I think it's because I need to confirm my email account. This is good. Okay. If I do this, okay, cool. And then I feel like this should be easy, because then all I need to do, I'm going to guess, is copy and paste a link to the thing. I'd rather explore my own. Oh, yeah, free, obviously. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah. And then chat box. Oh, here it is. Okay, wait. So I'm not going to do the tutorial. YouTube. Okay. And then I'm connected to my YouTube account anyway, which is great. You'll have to see it. And then, cool. I actually think we might have this in place. Or... Well, okay. That was a bit weird. It just took me on a loop. But have I got this? Okay, so... Chat box. Oh my goodness. Continue. What do you... What do you mean identifier missing? What does that mean? What are you saying? What's an identifier? User identifier missing. What are you saying, you stupid thing? I hate my life. It's like I hate when you think you found a perfect solution. I was like, yeah, I can just, use this thing. That's how I can have my chats be displayed from now on, just using stream. What are people... Okay, let me actually look at the chat. Oh my God, I've got so many comments open. Okay. Thank you, Zombie Pup. That's so good. No, I can't click the top chat part. This is so... Wait, hold a minute. Now I can see you. Yes. Okay, this is fine. All right, let's just continue. Whoops.
And my response will be divided into 2 parts. This is part number 1. All right, there's your blibbity blab. Let's get going.
1 moment. I'm clicking off for 5 seconds. This is something else.
Like I said, we're going into 5 reasons why King Critical is not an atheist. And he starts this with a long description of the movie 12 Angry Men. I know he makes a little joke that it's angry atheist. It's just a little joke he does. And his whole point seems to be to illustrate reasonable doubt and whether a belief is justified or not. Like if you have enough evidence, and even if there are problems with some of the evidence, isn't your belief still warranted? Well, we're going to skip over it because I'm not as interested in it. I haven't seen the movie, but fine. Like, that's cute. He has a nice little way to start his video. We're also going to skip over a part where Casey talks about this being different from his videos about why he's not a Muslim, Jew, or Catholic. Again, not really relevant.
Okay, so right away, I feel like the important substance of my argument is being slightly glossed over. So I just want to clarify what it is that I was saying. Great intro, 10 out of 10. Yeah. Oh, wait. Okay. I thought you were talking about me and what I've been doing so far, but I can't believe we're 20 minutes into this. Okay. Anyway. So, basically, the point of the 12 Angry Men analogy, for those who don't know, because I think it is worth stressing what the analogy was, is that it's a court case, and there's loads of small things that can all be explained away. But the point I'm making is, even though all those small things can be explained away, you nonetheless might have a situation where the preponderance of all of that evidence means that you can't explain it all away. I think this is a pretty obvious point that most people can intuitively understand, but it's just worth pointing out that's the point I was making. Because I saw a few people in the chat who, in the comments rather, of this video, who didn't seem to understand that, even though I think it's a pretty intuitive point that sometimes there might be a case where a lot of arguments where none of those arguments would convince you on their own, when they're all together, you're like, well, hold on a minute, okay, I could have dismissed one of these arguments, I could dismiss 2 of these arguments, but 3, 4, 5, 6, even more than that, all of these arguments, suddenly it's actually much more convincing.
Relevant. So let's just get started here.
Here, I would expect you to probably be able to
explain. Yeah, it's like such. I don't understand why the audio quality was so bad, because it's not on. Yeah, like I said, it's not on my end, but whatever.
Explain away any one of these individual points.
Okay, so it's
in fact, I would actually almost go so far as to say that if just one of these arguments did convince you, that might be a little bit dumb. Because to go from atheism to theism is a pretty big jump, so I would expect it would take more than one argument to convince you. And perhaps it would take even more than 5, but in my view, taking all of these 5 reasons together to try to explain them all away would be going beyond reasonable.
I think instead of arguments, you just need some evidence. Like, I don't need 5 arguments to believe plants exist or that gravity is a thing. Okay, fine. So we're going to skip over this.
Okay, 2 things there. One, arguments are evidence. Like, if someone gives you an argument for something, that's a reason to believe that thing, and therefore that would be evidence. Evidence is just something that makes something more likely to be true than not, and a good argument for something would qualify as that. Second of all, it is a bit interesting to me that the analogy given here is to things that are just, like, obviously true. And yeah, obviously it's not as easy to show God exists as to show that just it's easy for me to show this microphone exists. Here it is. But there's many other things it would be much harder for me to demonstrate than that this microphone exists. That seems to be setting the standard at a kind of ridiculous point. Like, if you're basically saying, well, you can't show this as easily as the plants exist, I don't know, it just seems a bit weird, because obviously there's many other legitimate inquiries. Just off the top of my head, does free will exist? That's an objective question. Either free will does exist or it doesn't exist, and that's going to be a conversation where you're not just going to be able to point to a conclusion as simple as, or evidence as simple as, here's a plant, it exists. It's this kind of strange thing that atheists do, where they are often quite confident, and this is not all atheists, I'm just talking about certain, I guess you call them atheist apologists, who will have a lot of confidence in their beliefs, but then they'll almost shield their beliefs by holding them to this ridiculously low standard of falsifiability, if that makes sense. So basically, the implication there as well, unless you can show it as easily as all this other stuff, I don't know, it just seems a little bit misleading or misstating the case.
Next short section where he talks about wishing his viewers Merry Christmas, and that's cool, nice viewer interaction. Let's get to the first reason.
Reason 1. The one true religion. So this isn't really...
Usually I get water, but I thought seeing as I'd been doing the whole chat thing, I couldn't justify getting up, so I asked my wife, who's pregnant, to get me the water.
My best argument, but it's where I ought to start for one important reason. Firstly, because it's something you hear all the time from atheists as a challenge to religious logic, more than anything else. Doesn't your argument validate any other religion as much as it validates yours?
All right, so the first reason is the one true religion, and I guess why you believe in the specific religion you do. And I like how he doesn't think this is a good argument. I mean, on him saying that, I already have red flags going up in my head. Like, why don't you start with your best reason?
Okay, first of all, I didn't say it wasn't a good argument. I just said it wasn't the best argument of all the ones. And I also, I think, explain why it is that I didn't start with my best reason. And for the record, I usually don't start with my best reason. And that's just because I like the arguments to flow together so that one argument kind of leads into another. And yeah, I basically explained why, which is that a lot of atheists start off with this attitude of, well, even if you could show a God exists, I still wouldn't believe in a particular God because, you know, that's just so much more unlikely. And therefore to, I guess, challenge the atheists in a way that they wouldn't expect, I'm saying, and basically my argument is, not only do I think that if God exists, there is a view of God that is much more credible, but I think the fact that view of God is so much more credible than any other view of God suggests that there is one true, correct notion of God. That's basically why I'm setting up the argument where I am.
But really, it is true that lots of religions have gods, so how do you know your God is the one supported by your beliefs? Let's hope we get clarity on that. Now, he's going to talk about how he's made videos on why he's not in the other main Abrahamic religions, and then he says this.
In fact, even if you've seen them before, you should probably refresh your memory on them.
Like, LOL, I ain't watching them. I ain't giving you more views. I actually don't care about why you reject those religions, and having watched this video once all the way through, I'm not convinced that they would be worth a watch, but, you know, that's just like my opinion, man.
Okay, yeah, whatever, fine.
But unfortunately, the substance of those videos might fall on deaf ears, because even though I very much tailored my objections to each individual specific religion, such that they could only really apply as arguments against those specific religions, I still had so many atheists in the comments saying, yeah, this is all well and good, but you could apply any of these arguments to Christianity just as much. And yeah, okay, sure, fine. If you think that's the case, do that. Apply those arguments to Christianity and see how far that gets you. I've made videos where I've explained here are these specific claims of Islam, Judaism, and Catholicism, and here's why I think they're all wrong, specifically those claims. The reason why I haven't made an equivalent video for Christianity is because I can't come up with even one argument that presents a massive issue for Christianity, never mind 5.
You can't find one issue with Christianity? I find that hard to believe. I find the central important aspect of Christianity flawed, that a God incarnated himself and died on a cross as some ultimate sin sacrifice so that we could win heaven. I just don't know. I can't accept that. It just seems like a story to me. And
okay, I think I'll pause there. I'm trying not to pause too much and just respond to every little thing because, you know, I think sometimes that can get almost a bit like heckly. So right away, a little bit of an issue, which is that I didn't say that I couldn't come up with one argument against Christianity. I said I couldn't come up with a massive issue of Christianity. So, you know, that's basically it. obviously that's different, right? I can come up with some criticisms, but just not a criticism that I think is massive or indeed comparable to the issues I had with other religions. Now, the other interesting thing is that this would then be an opportunity for Scarlett to say, well, here is my massive issue of Christianity, or here is just one example of a massive issue of Christianity. But you'll notice that the issue presented is not very compelling as an argument. Let me just kind of go back and listen to that again.
I find the central important aspect of Christianity flawed, that a God incarnated himself and died on a cross as some ultimate sin sacrifice so that we could win heaven. I just don't know. I can't accept that.
Okay, so the argument is, this is my big issue of Christianity. I find the whole concept flawed. The idea that God was a sin sacrifice to himself so we could win heaven. That's basically the statement. I can't accept that. Now, already, it's kind of, when you think about the videos where I've done, or where I've criticized other ideas, I don't think I've said anything equivalent to, oh, I find the whole idea of Islam flawed. The idea that God appeared to Muhammad and delivered his final revelation that was his eternal words, and Muhammad read them verbatim. I just don't find that, that's not really an argument. You're basically saying, I don't agree with the thing. With that said, obviously this would only make sense if there was something just obviously really stupid about that. And I guess the only thing someone could say is stupid about that is, well, why would God need to sacrifice himself to himself? But the really simple answer there is that God is constrained by his attributes, specifically his attribute of justice. So because there was sin in the world, God, as a perfectly just God, was not able to abide with that sin. And the only way to get around that was to have some kind of punishment for that sin be experienced by something else. Now, you can say that doesn't make any sense, but in terms of a perfectly just God, that, or you can say you don't like that, for example. Maybe you say, well, I don't like, can't God, if I can just say, okay, you're forgiven, whatever, no biggie, why can't God do that? And that's fine if you want to say, well, you personally don't really understand why God would be like that. But if the theory is, the working understanding is that God is perfectly just, he's constrained by that attribute of being perfectly just, then it is internally consistent to have a system where there needs to be some kind of workaround there. And the Bible, I think, embraces that, if you like, apparent contradiction with actually one of my favorite quotes in the Bible, and I guess by extension one of my favorite verses. Although I must admit, even though it's one of my favorite verses, I don't even know what book it's in, never mind chapter and verse. But it basically talks, I think it's in Romans, but that's just because when in doubt, Romans, which is, it talks about God being both the just and the justifier of the ungodly. So basically God is just in that he needs to punish sin, but he is the justifier in that rather than punishing our sin through us being vessels for his punishment, he came down to earth, lived a perfect life, and yet still became the vessel for the punishment we deserved. That's how it is. I can understand someone saying, well, that doesn't really make sense to me. That's not how I would do it in my own human way. But to just say, that doesn't make sense to me, therefore it's nonsense, or therefore, I don't think that's a very compelling argument. And I would actually say there are more compelling arguments against God. In fact, the real test here is, was Scarlett going to present a reason that is better than what I said I was going to do, which is my 5 biggest issues of Christianity. So kind of just to set the standard, I guess, set the benchmark. At some point, I did want to make a video where I said, all right, well, obviously I've criticized atheism, I've criticized all these other religions, but just for record, here are the biggest issues I have with Christianity. And in that sense, kind of when I'm looking at atheists saying what their big issues with Christianity are, I'm kind of thinking, well, do I think those are even better issues with Christianity than the issues I have? And one of the big issues, for example, I have with Christianity is hell. So the idea that there is eternal conscious torment for anybody, and that lasts forever, that seems really like a horrible idea to me. I can understand the idea that sin needs to be punished. That makes sense to me. I can understand the idea if we've done bad things, then either God mercifully, graciously takes the punishment for us. I can understand the idea that if that doesn't happen, maybe there needs to be some sort of cosmic punishment in order to bring the universe into alignment, if you want to think of it in those terms. But the idea that that has to take the form of an eternity of conscious torment, that doesn't really sit very well with me. So that's a criticism I have. I'm not going to get into all of my thoughts around that criticism, but I'm just saying I think that is a stronger argument, because if God is supposed to be perfectly loving, why would you have the system of people are just burning in hell for all eternity? I think that's a better argument, and I think actually in reality all 5 of my biggest issues of Christianity are better arguments than what was just presented there. The other thing I have half a mind to do is show for context the 5 arguments I gave against each of the religions that I've spoken about previously on channel, but I think I've been paused for a while on just one point, so we'll power through, I guess. It's interesting. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so I was going to say Matsu. I always say your name wrong. I'm just going to call you Matsu. Yeah, Matsu's very active in the chat, but yeah, I can see there's a few other people. Yeah, how is it hard to believe a Christian can't find a massive issue? Exactly, because when I'm saying like a massive issue, I'm meaning an issue that would actually pretty much prevent you from believing the religion, or at least present huge issues for believing the religion. And like I say, I do have some issues which I think are serious issues. These are issues where if someone said, oh, here's my issue with Christianity, I would really respect them for having that as an issue, because I'm like, okay, like that is the kind of thing you ought to be thinking about. That's like a very legitimate concern to be having. But obviously I have my explanations for it. And yeah, so Axiom saying that's just restating the disagreement. Yeah, that's kind of how it seems to me. All right, proceed. I'm just saying right away, not, I think, a great caliber of argument on display.
It just seems like a story to me. And my guess is your critics have done the work about knowing how you could apply your arguments against Christianity. But, it's hard to know with general statements like you said here. So I don't know how those interactions went. And by the way, this guy doesn't think Catholics are Christians. It's worth holding on to that little nugget as we move through. Anyway.
Okay. So, by the way, I guess, I'm going to guess, I'm locking this in right now, that whole Catholics aren't Christians, hold on to that nugget. I think that might be brought up when I speak about how Christianity is such a global religion. So I say, Christianity is like a really global religion. And obviously, maybe, again, if we're making good arguments, I think that a good argument, although an argument which I believe I can counter, would be to say, well, hold on a minute, it doesn't make any sense. How can you say Christianity is a global religion if you don't even think Catholics are Christians? Whatever. With that said, okay, I think we are going to do this, because I think we're going to do it very, very briefly, because I don't care. Let me also just, while I'm here, I'm going to intermittently check this chat. Okay, it seems like there's nothing happening on the... Oh, wait, actually. Oh, Zach. Okay, you're here. Oh, yeah, this sucks. For some reason, there are still some people who aren't getting their comments through. Like, Ms. Markle had a few more about, just the 12 Angry Men thing. And also, I'm seeing Zach, I believe, had a comment that's not shown. Oh, wait, no, okay, no, it has shown up. Sorry, okay, good. That's fine. Forgive me, I was wrong. Okay. I was wrong. Something. All right. Just give me a moment. Yeah, I'm going to get up these things because obviously this Scarlett has skipped over my arguments that I presented against these other religions and then said, well, I'm sure that these arguments can be applied to your religion. I don't know. To me, it just seems a little bit... Okay, it's probably going to start playing. Okay, it's not. It's muted. That's good. It seems a bit weird to me to just not even bother to actually look at the arguments and say, well, actually, they can be applied. But whatever. Okay, so very briefly, here are my, 15 arguments in total against other religions. And let's see if these can apply to Christianity. So against Islam, my first criticism was that it was a redundant revelation. And basically my point there was that if Islam's coming along and saying that it is going to be the next religion, it's the next thing, it's going to be, like, forget about Christianity, forget about Judaism, now it's Islam. The obvious question would be, well, what does Islam add to Christianity? What does Islam add to Judaism? And again, I'm going to just say these arguments are really simple. I'm not going to fully substantiate them. But if you look into Islam, the answer is it doesn't add anything. It's not like Islam, because obviously if you compare Christianity to Judaism, Christianity it adds so much. Like, basically, they're just such radically different religions. They have completely different theological frameworks. And that's because of all the ways that Christianity recontextualizes the Jewish scripture. And that means that you certainly can't just dismiss Christianity out of hand, because if a Christian comes along and says, hey, we've got a new religion, a new revelation, blah, 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 well, if it's introducing lots of new ideas, you at least have to take those seriously. With Islam, it's not even really introducing any new ideas. Now, does that apply to Christianity? Well, you've probably already noticed, no, because I'm directly using Christianity as the frame of reference to show how that's not the case with Christianity. Similar thing, by the way, my next argument against Islam was the historical critique, and this is the fact that our earliest sources about Muhammad don't appear until 200 years after his death. That when you look into some of the claims, I think the interesting one for me is that there is actually very little evidence to show that Mecca was even even an active merchant center at the time when Muhammad supposedly lived. And there's all this stuff about how it's much more likely, based on the geography described, that the narrative of the Quran is actually taking place in Petra. But of course, the other thing is you have the fact that Islam makes claims that Abraham traveled from Babylon down to Mecca and built the Kaaba 2,000 years before it was actually built. You have the fact that it is actually, I think, is this? No, okay, yeah, it's not even so. Yeah, this is, oh my goodness, there's so many arguments. So, and then also contained in that, I was wondering if this was a separate argument. No, this is all part of the same argument, which is the fact that Islam takes stories from like the 3rd and the 4th century about Jesus that are known to be, like, every single scholar recognizes these are later myths, fables, all that kind of stuff. But it basically purports them to be true. All of this stuff points to the fact that Islam was written completely detached from actual contemporary knowledge of history. And of course, certainly detached from modern knowledge of history, where we know a lot more, and we know that the Kaaba was not built in 2000 to 1500 BC and all that kind of stuff. Does this apply to Christianity? Well, no, or at least certainly not to the same extent. With Christianity, you can say, well, the Exodus account is a little bit suspect. There's some issues with the Exodus account. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay, but everything else in the Old Testament, well, let me phrase it. Everything else after the Exodus account seems to actually line up. And if you do like any sort of biblical archaeology tour, I've done one in the British Museum. It's crazy the number of things that we found archaeologically that perfectly line up with the books of Kings, of Samuel, of Chronicles. Well, Chronicles is just a compilation of Samuel and Kings. But yeah. And then obviously with regards to things like the Gospels, even the most skeptical scholars will place them within a century of Jesus' life, which is certainly much better than Muslims, who even Muslims will recognize that our hadith about Muhammad and stuff like that didn't appear until 200 years later. It doesn't. I knocked a cable. So, yeah, sorry, I'll speed this up. I'm always like, I'll do things. And I'm always just like, I need to explain where I'm coming from. But so basically, next argument against Islam was I said that there's this particular argument in the Quran itself that says that the Quran must be true because it's written so perfectly. But even Muhammad's top Quran reciters weren't able to agree on what should or should not be in the Quran, showing that even the best Quran readers weren't able to actually determine what was good enough to be in the Quran. Therefore, you can't possibly say that therefore, that argument is necessarily terrible, but it's an argument presented by the Quran itself. Is there an argument presented in the Bible that is obviously bad? I'm not aware of one. So there we go. And then, okay, this one's an obvious... Oh, well, this one's just a fun one. This one definitely doesn't apply to Christianity, which is that Islam can't be global because of the way Ramadan works in the Arctic regions where people live. You basically starve to death because you wouldn't be able to eat at all if Ramadan happened at certain times of year. And then finally is the fact that Muhammad, obviously, and we all know this, did many, many immoral things when it came, you can look into that. And then you compare that to Jesus. Everyone agrees that Jesus Christ was wonderful, blah, blah, blah. So these arguments just don't apply. And then obviously, so with Judaism, again, let's see. So these arguments are, one, the fact that after the Jews rejected Jesus, you had just you had the Roman exile, all that kind of stuff. This would seem to be something that coheres with they're being punished for rejecting Jesus. Like, it's very odd and coincidental that the minute that they're like, oh no, actually we reject Jesus, things fall into motion that basically lead to the Jews getting completely scattered and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that can apply to Christianity. I'm not sure what the argument would be there. Tricking, so then you've got the thing like they always try and get around the rules when it comes to the Sabbath and stuff like that. I don't think there's any criticism of Christianity there. The fact that the Old Testament contains grammar that indicates divine multiplicity, which would seem to be a precursor of the Trinity. I mean, I don't see that's literally an argument for Christianity, so I don't see how you can say there's arguments that apply to Christianity. I am actually going to stop now, but the point is, I just bring this up to show that the specific arguments I made matter. And I don't think any of them can apply to Christianity, but if you're going to kind of say this and be like, well, he says that these arguments don't apply to Christianity, but I think they do, well, I think you should go to the effort of actually showing why equivalents to my arguments against other religions apply to Christianity, especially bearing in mind the only argument you've made so far is just that Christianity doesn't make sense to you.
Anyway, he goes on to talk about a video he wants to make on issues he finds with Christianity, but that those issues aren't deal breakers. Okay. He doesn't go into any detail here, though, so we're going to skip to this anecdote.
Okay, cool.
I remember in this one debate, Christopher Hitchens, I believe against William Lane Craig, said even if you could prove that God exists, you still have all your work ahead of you in order to show that Christianity specifically is true. This is a sentiment I hear a lot from atheists. For as much as atheists are defined by not believing in God, you'd almost think they consider proving God's existence to be trivial, because so many of them would say the real challenge is proving Christianity is true specifically, and indeed Christians are already atheists regarding every other God.
I don't know why Casey thinks it would be trivial to prove a God. I certainly don't, and I didn't hear that sentiment expressed in the quote from Hitchens.
Well, so just for the record, the fact that he's saying you have all your work ahead of you, even after you prove God, suggests that proving God is no work at all. Like, just the literal meaning of the expression, if you've done this, you still have all of your work ahead of you, means that what you just did isn't part of your work, suggesting it wasn't actually work. In other words, it's trivial. Obviously, at the same time, I did say, let's note, you'd almost think this. And that is true. The amount of times that you see atheists focusing on this question of, well, which God is true, blah, 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 and that's where they put their focus. You would almost think, oh, it seems like they're not even as focused on this question of how do you know a God exists. They're more just focused on how do you know which God exists. I don't really see the issue there.
But I do think it's true that if you assert, like a lot of Christians do, and like Lobar Bill does, that there is some untestable God that exists outside of space and time, you still haven't shown why that God is the God that demands what the God of Christianity demands.
Well, again, obviously there's no point engaging with this because you self-admittedly haven't even looked at all into me explaining why it is that I find other religions so lacking in credibility. So that's fine.
That is why you still have this big leap. But I don't know that that means that it's trivial to prove a God.
I want to fully communicate where I'm at on this issue. I am orders of magnitude more convinced that if God exists, Christianity is true, than I am actually convinced that God exists. Which really shouldn't be that surprising. I mean, I've already said that I think that my arguments in this video aren't as good as my arguments against other specific religions.
Okay. If these aren't that good, why then? Just why do they warrant belief?
Okay, no, by the way, I didn't say aren't that good. I said aren't as good. And I also said I am orders of magnitude more confident in other things. So the basic situation, it's not as if I'm saying, oh, I'm slightly convinced that Islam is false, and my arguments against Islam are much better than Christianity. No, much better than my arguments against atheism. No, I'm saying that I am massively, overwhelmingly convinced Islam is false, and that's based on the fact I think the arguments against Islam are stronger than my arguments against atheism. It's really that simple. Let's just let that be a pretty short response. I didn't say they aren't good. I didn't say they aren't that good. I said they aren't as good as my other arguments against other beliefs. And yeah, that makes sense.
I have to say that hearing this makes me want to stop right here. And by the way, having listened all the way through once, the only reason I am continuing is that there are some interested knots the discussion gets tangled in. But really, KC here is not the first theist I've heard who makes cumulative cases of what aren't very strong arguments. He goes on here to discuss his level of certainty, and needless to say, he's really, really certain. He also says he doesn't worry about Islam, Catholicism, or Judaism being true.
Well, hold on, you're saying I also... So what I actually suggested was that I'm not that certain that God exists, but I am very certain if God exists, then those other religions are false. So you're kind of confusing things a bit.
And then we get this.
And again, to stress a point, actually, I don't think I've said this yet. I was not raised a Christian. I was an atheist until I was 18 years old and I started university.
When he says he was an atheist, I don't quite know what he means. Like, was he in a secular family? Was his family, nominally religious? Was he skeptical or prone to superstition? He will elaborate a bit more on his conversion or whatever later. I think we'll get to it in the second video. So I won't belabor the point here that your epistemology is an important thing to consider when determining the quality of your thinking that you did on the way to forming your beliefs. The I was an atheist can be a rhetorical trick, and it's when we can play on ourselves to think that we were one way, and actually the way we're defining it is different from the way other people are defining it.
So yeah, this is very simple. I don't really like doing this, especially since, as I mentioned, I've got a kid on the way, and I'm aware of the fact that my child probably will be Christian, and definitely won't be able to say, and I was an atheist. I was raised in an atheist household, blah, blah, blah. And I would advise them not to, and to be honest, there is a thing in Baptist circles where they're very big into the idea of the conversion, the testimony, blah, blah, blah. And I think it creates a certain disingenuous vibe where you will get people who are just raised in fully religious environments insisting that they were, in some sense, basically atheists. And I was thinking, no, come on, don't say that, because that's not the case. I'm pretty much inclined to guarantee that some of the people I know who were, and based on my knowledge of their families, where they are very deeply religious, religion is 100% ingrained into their life, I don't think that anybody from those families can honestly say, yeah, I was an atheist growing up. Anyway, whatever. But the point is, so I'm not disparaging that though, and I think that it's not necessarily a good thing to push on this idea of, oh, I was an atheist and that gives me credibility. And I kind of feel bad about doing that when I do, but I feel like in my specific case, I don't know, I do it anyway, because it's... I think one of the reasons why, something you'll notice if you go through the comments, is there's lots of people on this original video who are just very confused by my arguments. And that, I think, it comes more into play when you take everything I'm saying holistically and they're just I don't understand what this guy's saying, blah, blah. I think one of the reasons why people might get confused by my specific arguments is because I was an atheist. And that means as someone who was an atheist, I'm not going to have been convinced by all of the same arguments you've heard a million times before from other people. Because, well, I had, as an atheist, already heard those arguments and dismissed them. And therefore, most of my arguments are arguments that are quite out there, simply because those are the arguments that occurred from, I don't want to say really think, basically occurred from being challenged about my atheism in a deeper way as someone who was just a bog standard atheist. And I suppose that's the point I really need to build up to, which is I was just an atheist, like just a complete atheist. And indeed, most people in the UK are atheists. My grandparents were atheists, and well, they're still alive actually, and they are atheists. The UK has been, I think, secular for 100 years at this point, and most people's grandparents in the UK are not religious. At best, maybe they put religion on the census as like a cultural thing, but not even that, I think, most of the time. So this is just to say that there's plenty of scope in the UK for just growing up without any real semblance of religion whatsoever, and that's basically where I came from. My parents are both atheists, my grandparents are atheists, my friends basically were all atheists. I had a Muslim friend, okay, and maybe some of them were in some way religious, but basically they were all functionally atheists as far as I knew, the vast majority of them. Whatever. The point is that I was just an atheist. There's no like, oh, I was raised in a Christian home, but I was mad about God or anything like that. I was just a bog standard atheist in the exact same sense that I think most atheists in the UK who are still atheists today were probably atheists and have been atheists their entire life.
I will say that I had a reverse journey. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, K through 12, and I gradually grew out of that belief. I have family members that are still believers, and I have some friends that believe in other forms of Christianity. But I just say this to point out, I came out of sincere belief, and it just is a thing that kind of happened, and as I thought about it more, I realized there's no reason to believe. I'll elaborate more a bit, so let's get back into it.
Cool.
I gave fair consideration to every major religion. It's just all the other ones couldn't stand up to scrutiny, no matter how much grace I gave them, while Christianity kept holding up even under rigorous testing.
I would love to know what rigorous testing he did. Catholicism definitely lost its hold on me by high school.
Well, that would make sense because Catholicism is one of the religions that kept just falling apart no matter how much grace I gave it. So yeah, basically with Christianity, I think that the main test is you read the Bible, and the first thing is if you find something that is confusing, something that is challenging, bothering, blah, 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 you look into, okay, well, what are some potential explanations for this? And if you keep finding, oh, wait, there are explanations for this, and that explanation makes sense, that's an example of it holding up. And it could be, so obviously it might be things like whether the Bible is internally consistent, because obviously if an idea isn't internally consistent, that's one of the standard ways we know an idea is wrong. Like, pretty obviously, right? Like, one of the easiest ways to say, well, how am I going to find out if this idea is nonsense? The first thing you can look at is, well, doesn't this seem to contradict the other things they're saying? So, for example, to bring it to the trans issue, as has already been mentioned, there's many examples of how the issue of the trans issue is that it's internally inconsistent. Obviously, there's the very fact that they say, like, a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. To say that a woman, like, what you're doing there is you're saying that being a woman matters. That, hey, trans women are women. It's a pretty obvious point of the trans ideology that the claim of being a woman is something that's very important to a lot of people, but that is internally inconsistent with then having an entirely circular definition of woman that doesn't actually mean anything, because how can you attach a lot of value to a definition that doesn't actually have any substance to it? And again, I could go on. I think most good criticisms of ideas, or a lot of bad ideas, let's say, they fall apart when the internal inconsistency of those ideas is shown to be bad. But the other thing, of course, is whether they are inconsistent with other known truths. So with Christianity, you might look at what do we know about when the Bible was written, about how the Bible was written. And what you'll find is that even very secular scholars will point out that we have, I think, 30... I feel like I'm crazy, but it's a very high number. I want to say 30,000 manuscripts from, and I must admit, I can't remember exactly how early it is. I'm not like a huge expert on the whole textual criticism thing, but a lot of, and it's like Bart Ehrman who talks about this, so many early manuscripts from incredibly early on compared to other texts. I mean, the Bible is a very well documented, very well sourced text in terms of the early manuscripts we have, because so many people were copying it down, so many people were writing little sections of it. We can like cross-reference from all over the Mediterranean. Some people writing down here in the 2nd century, we've got some stuff in the 1st century. Do we have anything from the 1st century? I'm not sure, but we've got enough stuff from all over the place from quite early on, from the first few centuries, that we can say this was not something that was being changed. This was not something that was being altered from place to place very much. In fact, I think what I'm actually getting to 30,000 is Bart Ehrman said, we have 30,000 textual variants in the New Testament. And that's actually a good thing, because what it shows is that this was not something that was being copied from person to person. Rather, it was something that different people were writing down. Because they're writing down different spellings, maybe slightly different wordings. But the interesting thing is that Bart Ehrman has gone on record as saying, and this is a very famous secular scholar, has gone on record saying that none of the variations in the New Testament from these 30,000 different variants we have all over the Mediterranean, none of them contradict on a core point of Christianity. That's just an example of how Christianity is consistent with the outside world. Now, there are issues with Christianity. So an obvious example of where Christianity stumbles would be something like the Exodus. What we have in Christianity is this explanation of seemingly, the actual numbers when you look at them would suggest about 2 million people leaving Egypt in the Exodus event. And then you look at the actual history and you see that there is no evidence at all for such a massive number of people leaving. And there's kind of two aspects to that. The first thing you can do is you can point out that actually our translation on the numbering is probably off, and it basically has to do with the fact that a word that is translated as 1,000 could actually be just translated as group. So, even in the in standard English, we can sometimes use the word thousands to mean almost a metaphorical sense. So that's one argument, that basically the numbers are not necessarily literal, and the numbers could have been used to mean something else. And then, of course, there's the fact that, well, yeah, it would be great if we found some really strong archaeological evidence for the Exodus having happened, but evidence, or rather absence of evidence, isn't always evidence of absence. So there we go, whatever. But this is the kind of stuff you need to be doing. You need to be looking at the Bible and saying, is this internally consistent? Is Christian theology internally consistent? Because a lot of bad ideas fail based on being internally inconsistent. And I would actually say I think every single religion that I disagree with in some way has a point of internal inconsistency, which again, I'm not going to stress that any more than I have. But then, of course, there is the external inconsistency, which is also bad. This is the testing you want to be doing.
I kept some vague Christian beliefs for a few years after that, but most Protestant beliefs never seemed legit to me either. So it's interesting that he did rigorous testing, and whatever that was, his form of Christianity held up.
One singular reason I could give for why I'm a Christian, and therefore by extension why I'm not an atheist, is because I engaged in a comparative religious study comparing Christianity to all these other religions, and it wasn't marginal. It wasn't like, Christianity seems like it has slightly more chance of being true on balance. No, it was Christianity genuinely seems like it could be true, and every other religion has genuinely 0% chance of being true. There's just no doubt in my mind these other religions are false.
Hello, Zipically. How are you doing?
I was in high school, I took a comparative religions class, and I looked into all kinds of beliefs and attended all kinds of services, and none of them seemed to hold up in my mind. And when I became an adult, same kind of thing. Anytime that I would come across these beliefs and I was interested, it seemed cool. Like, it's all interesting, but the supernatural claims and the specific claims about a god, that just didn't add up in my mind.
And then in trying to explain why there would be this massive disparity, I couldn't come up with any plausible, naturalistic explanation. So I thought the supernatural made the most sense.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of argument from ignorance, right? Like, this is what I came up with, and I haven't been able to prove it wrong, so supernatural it is.
No, well, I've never really understood this argument from ignorance thing, because to me, it's just like if you have something you observe and you try to come up with lots of explanations for it, and then you realize there's only one explanation that makes sense. Because that's the thing, it's not an argument from ignorance, right? I'm talking about all this stuff I know. I know all of these things about different religions. I know all of the issues of the other religions. I know how well Christianity stands up under scrutiny. And I know that one possible explanation for that would be that actually the stuff Christianity is describing, that there is a God who is involved providentially in preserving his word and all that kind of stuff, that stuff would be a viable explanation. And then what I should obviously do is then say, well, is there another alternative explanation? No, there isn't. All right, well, I guess that makes the most sense. That's not an argument from ignorance. That is, you look at the available evidence, you have one explanation in mind as a possibility, and you think, well, let me see if there's any other explanations. Can't wait to watch the hour that I missed. There's about, I think, like 10 minutes you can skip where I'm fiddling around with some stuff. And you know what? I bet even still there's, let's see, is there any... Okay, there's no other messages that have been skipped. That's good. Yeah, there's some messages getting left over. Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, that 0.001% chance that some religion other than Christianity is true, other major religions make up even a fraction of a percentage of that.
Yeah.
My main concern is some sort of Lovecraftian trickster god is the most likely alternative to Christianity being true. You know, basically all organized religion is some kind of cruel joke, and it turns out that the actual divine being that exists is totally ambivalent towards us, or indeed actively malevolent.
Gotta say, no argument for me here. I'm with him on this. If there's a god, it is a god of chaos.
No, so what I actually said was I think that is the most likely alternative to the most likely theistic alternative to Christianity. So yeah, I mean, in some sense, I guess we agree in terms of it being a possibility we're ranking quite high. But obviously the difference is that I'm saying, actually, I think there is a God, and 99.999% chance is that if that God is indeed real, then it is the God of Christianity. But I think the second most likely thing is some kind of malevolent trickster God.
But of course, that isn't where he lands on religion, so this is just a humorous comment. But, you know, props for that. We like humor on this channel.
Anyway, you'll notice this addresses a lot of atheist concerns, like the geographic...
It wasn't entirely a humorous comment. I think one of the points I was getting at is that I think that the evidence for Christianity as the correct religion in contrast to all other possibilities is so strong that the most likely alternative is some kind of trickster god who's put all of this evidence to Christianity down just to, you know, play a prank. That's basically what I'm saying.
Distribution of religion. Yeah, people might believe all sorts of different religions in different places, but if I came to the question of which religion is true openly and honestly, and I saw that objectively there are good reasons to think one religion is more true than the other, then the fact that other people might agree based on geography is not relevant. And it's just so stupid when people say, well, you're only a Christian because you're from England. Well, yeah. Actually, if that's the case, I should be a Germanic pagan, right? Silly. Christianity had the power to convert people in England. Yes, it had the power to convert me 10 years ago, but it also had the power to convert my ancestors 1,500 years ago. The point remains the same. Christianity is convincing even to people who don't already believe it.
So the geographical argument is actually about the probability of an individual in a given society belonging to the dominant religion of that society. It obviously doesn't state that no one will ever change religions or denominations. It's about statistical probability. If you're born in India, you are more likely to be Hindu or Buddhist. If you're born in the West, you are likely to be some version of a Christian.
And the point I'm getting at is that the reason why the probability is so much lower is because Christianity is convincing. The issue is that the reason why these people bring up probability is because they want to argue that probability is the better explanation for why someone is religious, in contrast to the convincingness of the arguments. What I'm pointing out is that the convincingness of the arguments leads to the increased probability of people being Christian, even if that's something they inherit, because it's something they inherit from people who were previously convinced.
It should go without saying, but there are obviously minority religions in these places.
Yeah.
But even there, generally people continue to believe in the same religion they were raised in. Now, the geographic argument does not address how societies change and adapt when new beliefs are added in, so we're really not dealing with the argument the way it is intended to be used, and especially not looking at history, because it's not about what happened in the past.
No, but it is, because, again, the point... So, well, okay, I'm trying to work out what the argument is, because essentially the argument just, like, as I understand it, the argument being presented is, well, it's to do with the probability of why you believe in a particular religion. But it's like, well, to what end? That's not an argument, right? Just saying, well, probability-wise, you would have been, unless you're suggesting that the probability and the fact the probability. By Theo Ace Gump. Yes, I'll see you later. I'll be off in 20 minutes, I think. But yeah, good to have you here. Yeah, basically, unless the probability is supposed to be saying that, or unless the argument is supposed to be saying that because probability is the best explanation, therefore it suggests arguments aren't convincing, I don't see what the point is supposed to be.
It's about the probability today with the layout that exists today. I think it's important to add, too, that the geographic argument actually does take into account that if you were born at a different time, your religious beliefs would likely be different. So it's not about the fact that maybe in your country things changed between like the Middle Ages and now, but that when you were born, what is likely to happen. But looking at history...
Okay, so you notice this hasn't been expressed as an actual argument. Cool. Coolio.
AC says Christianity had the power to convert his ancestors. Interesting choice of words, because Christianity did indeed have the power of the state to coerce people.
So, again, Bart Ehrman, I think many other people have said that never mind the fact that Christianity would have become dominant in Europe, even without Roman adoption, it would have become the dominant. This is what other historians who've looked into matter have said. This is what, again, Bart Ehrman, he's a very popular atheist scholar of religion, has said. Other people, I think, have said this too. I think, there's a compelling argument for it, that even if Christianity had continued to be persecuted by the Roman Empire, it still would have become the dominant religion in Europe. And when you talk about like the reasons for that, well, you can point to the fact that it was, by all accounts, incredibly popular even before it was officially adopted as the correct religion. It was already really popular, and that's why you don't have this massive top-down effort in the Roman Empire to enforce it, because a lot of people are already on board of it. I guess that's all I really need to say. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say is, of course, you can see this even today, where in China, which, whatever, I'm not going to do the whole Western propaganda, China's the worst place in the world thing, but China does do a lot more to kind of make religion, a little bit like actually how it was in the Roman Empire, where Christianity is kind of curtailed because the state views it as a threat to some extent. Even still, so many people are becoming Christian in China. And I actually think just as the Roman Empire became a big force for Christianity spreading, I would not be at all surprised to see that by the time China is the uncontested superpower, it will also be the largest evangelical Christian country in the world. That would not surprise me even slightly, because that seems to be the way things are going. And yeah, that's basically what I would say there. The fact that it spreads so much, not only without the state enforcing it, but with the state explicitly suppressing it, suggests that's just a reality, and therefore it's not about having the power of the state. You're just wrong.
And society itself could act as a coercive force. And it should be noted that in pagan societies, there was often a willingness to add new foreign gods into the mix of their gods. They were fine with that. Cool, new stories, more gods, great. And they might have been coerced to move toward monotheism and to remove some of their pagan beliefs. All this to say that Critical seems to think that his ancestors were converted without any coercive power, and they stayed without any coercive power. It's just the message itself. And look, it is true.
The other point here, right, is that as the Vikings were massacring Christians and just like the Vikings were the ones doing all the killing, doing all the pillaging, doing all the murdering. The Vikings ended up getting converted. There's just so many examples you can point to where it is the people who had the power who were the ones actually fighting the Christians, but the Christians ended up converting them.
That an individual may have just drifted toward the dominant religion of their area, and indeed maybe Casey did, based on the power of the argument. The argument doesn't say that no one will independently choose the dominant religion, but it's worth thinking about why you chose it, because, you know, these thoughts do surround you. It undergirds much of culture and popular...
Yeah, that's the other reason I don't like this argument. It's one of those arguments where people are too cowardly to make an actual argument. It kind of reminds me of the other example I think about is when people do guilt by association around like the idea of, oh, you know that, and again I'm going to bring it back to the trans thing. Oh, you know, the Nazis are also against the trans people, and they just kind of say that. It's like, well, what's your argument there? And most of the time, people, they won't actually present it as an argument. They won't say the Nazis were against trans people, and it's like premise 1, everything the Nazis believe is wrong. Premise 2, the Nazis were against trans people. Conclusion, being against trans people is wrong. Because the problem is premise 1 there doesn't work, actually. There's things that the Nazis might believe that would be correct, and just because the Nazis believe something, that doesn't automatically make it wrong. It's a similar thing here, where I don't think anyone would ever be so brazen as to actually make this as an argument of just saying, premise 1, if you believe the dominant religion where you are, that suggests, you know, you didn't actually believe it based on reasoning. Therefore, if you didn't arrive at something by reason, that means there's no reason to believe it. Conclusion, there's no reason to believe it. Or however you want to phrase it as an argument. Again, that's just a hypothetical. I would expect or suspect that the reason why you never see people actually presenting this religion argument as something they're really going to express in clear terms is because they know that if they express it in clear terms, it wouldn't actually exist as an argument. I can see Carlster by now says, I think the argument is that there are different religions that are more popular in territories, which would imply that people believe it on a born-in-it basis instead of a arrived-at irrationally basis. If Christianity was the only religion that was popular when then your popularity is derived from convincingness would make sense, but Hinduism and Islam is popular too, so how do you explain it in that case? So actually I talk about this in the video, but in Hindu countries and Islamic countries, there are laws against trying to convert people to other religions. So I'm just like, honestly, I'm going to be real with you here. I absolutely think that if it was legal to try to convert people in the Islamic world, if it was illegal to try to convert people in Hindu countries, Hindu countries aren't as repressive, but they're still pretty repressive. They still do have a lot of rules about not converting people, not preaching, stuff like that. If all of that stuff was legal, I'm gonna say, based on precedent, I think those people would just become Christian. I think that literally if tomorrow Saudi Arabia said, we are going to allow evangelical Christians to come over, to start churches, to start knocking on doors, preaching, hosting events, sharing the gospel with people, all that kind of stuff, running Bible studies, running introduction to Christianity courses, I think that Saudi Arabia would be Christian within a few generations. Because the fact that the one exception is Japan. Japan is the one place where there is I think a big cultural issue with converting people to Christianity. And Japan has all sorts of, I think, cultural, societal problems when you look at things like their suicide rate and stuff like that. And that's the one exception. But apart from that, the vast majority of places where Christianity is not the dominant religion, it's places where it's actually illegal to try to convert people to Christianity.
People are thinking. And, you don't often think about these things like you don't think about the air you breathe. So are you sure that the things that convinced you were rational and reasonable, or were they things that were kind of a part of an interior thing that you haven't really given any thought to?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's just one of those things where, to me, the problem is that you're sort of just trying to hit, like, it's kind of just trying to make an argument without really making an argument, because you can't actually say, like, you can just kind of hint at, well, maybe you believe this based on nonsense reasons, but yeah, I don't find that too persuasive.
Neil deGrasse Tyson once rightly criticized God of the Gap style arguments as depending on an ever decreasing pocket of scientific ignorance. Well, I sort of get the same vibe from this geographical distribution of religion argument. It would be a good argument if you had loads of little individual highly localized pockets of totally different religion. But
Yes.
no, it seems like the exact opposite. Christianity has spread across the entire globe in the last 2,000 years. Your entire argument relies on an ever-decreasing pocket of spiritual ignorance.
So Casey is not thinking about statistical probabilities in this argument. That's what it's about. And frankly, he's not thinking about how religion spreads as if this is just an organic...
By the way, note the comment there is like, that's what this is about, but what is the actual... Like, there isn't actually an argument yet. Essentially, it's just saying, well, probability-wise, maybe the reason why you believe is because of the fact you were raised that way. Which, like, that's not an argument, though, because it's kind of like, well, that doesn't prove it's not true.
It just springs up in different places on its own. And also, by the way, he's talking about Christianity like it's a single thing instead of lots of denominations and lots of denominations. The biggest being Catholicism, which he does not include as Christians.
Yes, there we go. Okay, so I thought that was going to be brought up. So basically, what I'm getting at, and I've also, by the way, phrased this in a different way, which is sometimes I'll go beast mode and point out that Islam is an Abrahamic religion. It is a religion that seeks to get at the God of Abraham. And therefore, the lesson there is that, when people say, oh, which God do you believe in? There's so many gods. Well, actually, the vast, vast, vast majority of the world is in union in terms of agreeing with the God of Abraham. Now, I will say this, absolutely, we should not be understanding this in terms of however many people in the world are saved, because the Bible says that narrow is the way and broad is the path that leads to destruction. Of course, most people, even most Protestants aren't actually true believers, I don't think. And there are actually some Catholics who are functionally evangelical, and some of them might be saved. So it's not really a case, you can't look at the statistics and just the professed religion and based on that say, well, these are how many people are actually genuinely, truly Christian. But what's interesting to me is when you're talking about argumentation and you're talking about society, the question is, what religion are people seeking to get at? And I understand Catholicism to be people seeking to get at Christianity. And they are falling short of that. But still the fact that they are seeking Christianity, they're reading the Bible sometimes, all that kind of stuff, that is significant. So yeah, this isn't me saying that the global preponderance of Christianity is evidence of a huge number of people who are totally sincere in terms of actually being Christian on in basically a theologically substantial way, because I don't think that's true. But the point is, when you're talking about society and culture, the significance of Christianity is something that you can see on basically 5.5 continents, right? So Europe, and again, Europe is not, like, a lot of Europe is atheist, but still culturally you would say it's Christian, socially you would say it's Christian, and that's relevant. We're talking about how people are coming to the faith. The North America is Christian. South America is Christian. By the way, South America, a huge number. South America is I think it might have the largest growing proportion of evangelicals in South America, I should say, not South Africa. Whoops. And then, but speaking of that, Southern Africa, that's the half a continent, is growing in terms of being evangelical, and then Australasia is even. Also, of course, Antarctica. Technically speaking, most of the people there are from culturally Christian societies. So that's how you get 5.5 continents out of 7, which really isn't that bad. You're just left with North Africa and Asia, which aren't really very Christian But yeah.
In fact, Catholics make up about half of Christians, according to most people. And how did Christianity spread? Well, the state ordered it. It often made other religions illegal. And Catholics were not shy about doing crusades, including against their own people, and torturing and killing people, destroying artifacts of religions that they thought were heresy. This does include other versions of Christianity. It's all a part of the history. You should look it up.
Okay, so this is, I think, a very overstated case. Basically, as far as I know, and look, obviously I have no interest in defending the Catholics, and I agree, the Catholics did force their ideas on other Christians. You're absolutely right there, which is, say, actual Christians. 100% right there. But in terms of affecting the globe, it seems pretty obvious that actually the Catholics, they only really had a seismic impact on South America and also, Central America, Mexico, all that stuff. But everything else was evangelical. North America, those were evangelicals coming over. Australia, a lot of the settlers would have been evangelical. Africa, by the way, most of African converting to Christianity did not happen under colonialism. It's happened more recently through missionaries heading over there, preaching to people. And like I already said, there's many missionaries going to South America to preach to people, to convert people there. So yes, obviously, the fact that societies have conquered other societies, that is significant. But in the case of Christianity, most of it hasn't been through conquest. And the fact so much of it hasn't been through conquest suggests that even if the Spanish hadn't enforced it in South America, it probably would have happened anyway, because again, it wasn't enforced in much of North America, in Canada and the United States. It was just a situation where people came over there, preached, and they converted people that way. And that would have happened in South America, I'm sure. And indeed, it is happening in South America now, so case in point.
And how did it spread? Well, colonialism sure played a part.
Yeah, that's funny. Yes, Casey.
And today, missionaries still go out.
Yes, sorry, so Zombie Pop says, like in South Korea, in 1924, 1% of the population was Christian, now it's 31%. Yeah, it's crazy, these conversions that have happened, absolutely.
Promising food aid to groups and all kinds of things. And while Christianity, including Catholics, is the biggest religion by numbers, Islam has a quarter of the population, and unaffiliated is another quarter, so it's not like everyone just immediately gets convinced. All this to say, I don't think KC is actually engaging with the argument for what it intends to address. He stretched it out way beyond what it's supposed to do, and it's unrecognizable.
Again, I have not seen, maybe I've blinked and missed it, but it doesn't seem like the argument has been presented as anything more than just, well, maybe you just believe it because you grew up that way, which I don't think is like a counter argument. That's just saying, maybe.
The atheist argument is, if religion isn't true, we'd expect religious belief to be incredibly localized.
That isn't the argument, not at all. The geographical argument is about how likely it is for any given individual to accept the religion that dominates in their area.
That's not an argument.
If the inverse to that is at all true, then actually you're making an argument for religion. And when you look at the places where Christianity isn't the dominant religion, it's almost entirely places where proselytizing is to some extent illegal.
So again, we're treating Christians as a monolith. And a reminder, KC doesn't accept Catholics as Christians, but Catholicism is the largest denomination according to statistics. And again, even in minority religions, people tend to stay with whatever their family is. So we're just talking about statistical probability. Let's look at a country that was a British colony for a bit, India, and note how few Christians there are there.
It's illegal to proselytize in India.
Hindus still dominate there. Look, I could go on about this in more detail, but this would be...
Actually, wait, let me rephrase that. I think it's illegal in certain states to proselytize in India. I think it varies from state to state, so I don't want to be dishonest there or misrepresent reality.
Longer than the original video. I would just like to conclude that KC misses the point about the geographical argument and simplifies religion and history to serve a point that serves him.
So I brought this up to anticipate an objection so many atheists have. Proving God doesn't prove a specific religion. Well, in my case it does. And that's because I've studied the Bible in detail, and I've studied other major religions in enough detail that I have multiple standalone arguments to reject them as possibly being true. And I'm gonna guess that most atheists who are even disagreeing with me right now, thinking I'm a total idiot, haven't looked into this issue anything like as much as I have. If you're an atheist, please do one of these three things right now. Either just accept that you're not interested in deep comparative religious study, and as such, you have nothing to contribute to this quite important question of whether one religion...
By the way, worth noting that the person, Scarlett, who's currently reacting to this, did not bother to look at any of my, just even glance through my 3 other videos where I explain my issues with other religions. So that, I think, is pretty strong evidence of not being interested in this aspect of the discussion.
Is more likely to be true than any other, or actually commit to learning about Christianity in detail and substantiate the belief that Christianity is not more credible than any other religion.
And even then, obviously, when we looked at Scarlett's criticism of Christianity, you'll notice it was a very bare bones, basic criticism. It wasn't something that demonstrated a serious kind of engagement with Christian theology, which doesn't mean necessarily that Scarlett didn't do that, but it's just worth noting that's something which is missing that would otherwise demonstrate, like, oh, this is someone who has engaged with Christianity seriously.
Or commit to learning about religion more broadly and prove that actually every other religion has just as much of a legitimate claim to being true as Christianity.
I just have to laugh right here. This is a prove me wrong strategy, which shifts the burden of proof from KC to establish that a God...
Now, okay, so just to clarify a point, I already have made my 3 videos about the dominant alternative religions to Christianity. I haven't done a video on Hinduism yet, I'll admit that, but yeah, I've already done that work of basically saying, hey, here's, and of course what I'm doing here, I mean, this is all me dealing with the, well, so when I deal with the Catholics mostly, I get into the deeper theological matters of Christianity, but I've definitely produced that content on why I think other religions are not credible. I'm basically saying, look, if you're an atheist, you need to either do the same thing and give reasons why Christianity is not credible. Otherwise, I'm just going to say, well, seems to me like Christianity is credible, whereas all these other religions aren't, and that is significant, that there's this massive difference.
Exists, and that it is the specific God he imagines. And here's the issue. I have a lot of things going on in my life that interest me more than going back into the Bible to make a video that wouldn't satisfy him anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. Look, like I say, I'm fine for people to just accept that they don't have an interest in this.
Whether or not I am thinking he's an idiot, I just like that little, slip in there that maybe that's what we're thinking, and it's like a kind of a poisoning of the well. I will repeat.
Not really. Like, I mean, pretty obviously, a lot of people think I'm an idiot, so it's just it's an accuracy of the well.
That I was a Catholic, and I sincerely did all of the things that I was supposed to do. I went to Mass, and I did all the sacraments, and I read the Bible, and I studied all other religions, and I did it to my own satisfaction, like KC seems to have done for himself. But it would be a lot of work to lay out why I rejected all that again. What I'm interested in doing now with my channel is looking at other people's beliefs and arguments, and let me tell you that KC so far is not impressing me.
Well, again, bear in mind that you didn't even bother to look at what was quite central to this argument, which is that I think that there are many glaring issues with other religions and there aren't glaring issues with Christianity. You could have done one of two things. Either you could have, and maybe this would have been less appealing to you, you could have looked at the glaring issues with, you could have looked at my issues I've presented with other religions and maybe either shown those arguments aren't actually very good, or shown that those arguments apply just as much to Christianity. That would be a reasonable thing to do. But the other thing, of course, you could do is you could just freestyle it and say, no, here's my issues with Christianity. You could have even just said some off the top of your head, especially since I think this video was scripted in advance based on the fact that, obviously she said that she watched this in advance. But again, her only stated issue with Christianity really wasn't very good. And I think we can all kind of agree on that. It just wasn't massively compelling.
Not that he's trying to.
Because right now, why even bother talking about whether God exists without even bothering to come up with some conception of God in your mind beyond a magic man in the sky?
Oh yeah, like we haven't already done that. But anyway, I want us to hold on to this phrase that KC says right here. By magic.
So you're saying you have already, but you haven't, right? Most atheists, it's not like they're thinking, well, because what I'm basically saying there is that I think that if atheists actually looked into different religions, they thought, well, if I did think a God was likely to exist, which one would I find most convincing? Which one would I find most likely to be true? They could then actually engage with the question of does God exist in a much more interesting way. And I think that that is a issue that a lot of atheists have, that they are just thinking of this in terms of some generic notion of God, but really some generic notion of God, that's not something that I think even should particularly persuade anyone, because like you don't even really know what it is you're talking about believing in at that point. I think it makes a lot of sense to start by thinking, wait, hold on a minute, what actually makes most sense here as a possible God that could exist? If there is a God, what makes most sense? And then you can have a much more worthwhile discussion. I don't think that's something most atheists have done. Anyway, I'm actually going to not overrun my time too much this time. It's unfortunate that I had the distraction I did, but whatever. And I think nonetheless, I think that I can endeavor to finish this in part 2. I think we'll have a second part, and I should get this done. And as you, I think, heard, is this a new channel? Oh, no, Crumble, it's actually not. It's just, yeah, thank you, Zach, for the thanks. Thank you, everyone who's new here. Yeah, and again, if you just want to help me out, or if you genuinely did like the stream, then give it a like. That would be really appreciated. Yeah, so Crumble, this is not that new of a channel. It's been around for possibly longer than you think. When's part 2 streaming? Monday evening, put it in your calendar. Monday evening, 8:45 British time. By the way, right now we're 4 hours ahead of the United States. Oh wait, no, we're 4 hours ahead of the Eastern United States. But I think at the end of next weekend, we go forward. We enter British summertime, and that's just that's a thing that's going to happen. Get over it. So right now the timings are a little bit off compared to usual, but if in doubt and you don't live in the UK, just Google time in the UK and then go, oh, okay, it's that. Anyway, so it'll be 8:45 British time, Monday evening, and I think we should be able to knock this out. This was, like you said, the first part, so I'd be interested to see what the second parts are like. So far, I don't think this has been great. I just partially, I feel like maybe I feel like I threw the pace off at some times by maybe taking a little bit longer than I should have explaining some stuff on my end. And therefore, I can't entirely be like, oh, not that many good arguments have been made, because maybe if I'd spent a little bit less time talking on my own end of things, we would have heard some more arguments. But so far, the main takeaway is that I'm not very impressed with this lack of any specifics on why it is this person doesn't find Christianity persuasive. Because that's a big part of what I'm saying on my end. I'm saying I was an atheist, I looked into Christianity, I did find it persuasive, and I found it so persuasive that I was like, oh wait, this actually seems like the God that centered this might be true. All right, I'll see you all later. Have a fun day. I'm going to Peterborough tomorrow. There you go, that's your fun fact. I hope the petrol isn't too expensive.